So today's webinar is titled Communicating the State of Your River, Basin Report Cards and the Swim Guide. It is being brought to you by the Urban Waters Learning Network, ourselves at River Network, our partners at Groundworks USA, and the Pisces Foundation. And our webinar today is all about science communication, and it's going to focus on two tools, or really two organizations that are out there to help you communicate your science findings. Our speakers today are Gabrielle Parent-Delaunay from Swim Drink Fish Canada, and she is the Program Director for Swim Guide. Also with us today are Dr. Heath Kelsey and Emily Nastaz from the University of Maryland's Integration and Application Network, or IAN. And Heath is the Program Director for IAN, and Emily is one of the program's science communicators. So I think we can go ahead and get started now, and I'd like to introduce Gabby from the Swim Guide, who's going to start us off.
Great. Hello, everyone. Just get my slides up here. Wonderful. So as Adam said, my name is Gabrielle Parent-Delaunay, and I'm the Program Manager for Swim Guide with Swim Drink Fish Canada. Swim Drink Fish Canada, some of you might know us as Lake Ontario Waterkeeper. We've been working for a swimmable, drinkable, fishable future since we launched in 2001. So by blending science, law, education, storytelling with technology, we empower millions of people to know and safeguard their waters. Swim Drink Fish operates 7 initiatives, and that includes the Swim Guide. And each of these initiatives has a specific mission that contributes to the goal of building a national movement of active, informed, and engaged individuals working to ensure that communities can swim, drink, and fish forever. So today I'm going to introduce you to my program, the Swim Guide. And is everyone hearing me okay? I just got some feedback. And we're going to, how with the Swim Guide, we try to tackle the challenges and solutions of working with recreational water quality data in order to protect people from contracting illnesses and infections at the beach. So I'm also going to introduce you to our Open Data Standard project for the automated exchange of recreational water quality data, and as well as some new features that we launched just this summer in order to engage the public in our data collection. So first, Swim Guide. So Swim Drink Fish, the most popular question we receive and we continue to receive from the public is it safe to swim? So this is the question that really spurred the creation of the Swim Guide. And it's a question that people have about their water bodies all over the world. So I know from speaking with a lot of you that are attending today that this is a question that you're also receiving at your organizations. People want to know where they can swim. They want to know when they can get in the water. They want to know what the water quality is like, but they're really having a hard time finding the answer to a question that should be quite simple, that should be accessible. So we launched Swim Guide in 2011, and the goal was making water quality data easily accessible and easy to interpret for people who wanted to go swimming without getting sick. We wanted to protect public health with better beach and water quality information. So Swim Guide is a very, very simple concept. We find test results from monitoring bodies. So for example, from government monitoring bodies and from community-based monitoring programs, and we publish them to our website and apps as either having met or failed to meet the local recreational water quality standard. So red or green. Swim Guide is a website, and it's a smartphone app for iOS and Android, and it's also available as a widget. It's available in 3 languages. So again, this is all about accessibility. So you can access Swim Guide in English, French, and Spanish, and hopefully in the future more languages. It will always continue to be free. So it's free for the public who wants to access Swim Guide, and it's free for anyone who wants to use Swim Guide to share their data, or for either the government's data or their own data from their community monitoring programs. So at the most basic level, the public can visit our website or download one of our apps and find a clean place to swim. We have water quality information for over 7,000 beaches in Canada, the US, Mexico, New Zealand, Australia, and the Bahamas. And we recently just launched in Europe, in Ireland and France, and a few other countries. So just Poland will be joining us soon. So to provide this Swim Guide service, we spend thousands of hours, along with our affiliates, manually compiling water quality information from websites. So some of these websites are using legacy technologies, phone hotlines, spreadsheets, emails from health officers, so that our nearly 3 million users can access current water quality information and find a clean and close place to swim. So why do people need to access water quality data in as close to real time as possible? So this may be obvious to some of you, but it's worth repeating. So just to be clear, when I'm saying recreational waters, I'm referring to natural untreated water bodies where people swim, paddle, surf, fish. So not just those marine and freshwater sandy beaches. I'm talking about lakes, rivers, swimming holes, essentially where people are physically connecting with the water. So this can be a very wild location, but we also have lots of very, very urban places where people are getting in the water. So there are substantial benefits and lots of love for the rich water resources that we have here in Canada and the US. And according to the National Survey on Recreation and Environment, every year over 60% of Americans visit marine beaches, rivers, and lakes and ponds to swim and engage in other recreational water quality activities. And most of those 142 million people that head to the water every year, they do so on multiple occasions. In Canada, we have the exact same statistic. It's about 60% of Canadians that also head out to swim in our country's many, many water bodies. So, however, as many of you know, enjoying the most precious our precious resources, it comes with potential health hazards. So various sources of contamination expose recreational water users, so swimmers, bathers, to waterborne pathogens and recreational water illnesses. Sewage and stormwater are the leading contributors of water pollution and are the main culprits that put the health of beachgoers at risk. So in Canada, for example, the stats are about 200 billion liters of untreated sewage are being dumped in our waterways every year. And in the US, it's about 4.5 trillion liters. I'm sorry, I don't know the equivalent in gallons of untreated sewage. So sources of sewage pollution include sewage discharges from waste treatment plants, combined sewer overflows, septic malfunctions, and stormwater. And swimming in contaminated water, it leads to a number of illnesses ranging from mild to severe. So most of them are enteric, so that would mean having to do with your intestines. So you're looking at vomiting, diarrhea. Those are the most frequent adverse health effects. Acute fibro-respiratory illnesses, skin rashes, eye and ear infections. The list goes on, and they can be more serious, and in certain cases, they can be fatal. The purpose of recreational water quality monitoring in both Canada, the US, and around the world is to protect public health and safety from contaminated water. So when recreational water quality data is clearly and promptly communicated with the public, they can take measures that protect their health and the health of their family and friends. Recreational water monitoring is also key to understanding and tracking sewage contamination so we can identify and remediate contaminated waters. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, it can be very, very difficult for the public to get a simple answer to the question, could this water make me sick? The data can be very difficult to find. It may not exist at all, so places might not be monitored. It takes, in most cases, at least 24 hours and sometimes up to a week for data to be shared with the public. We have even seen cases where water quality information isn't even shared until the end of the monitoring season, so say in October as some sort of report. And the impact of this is quite startling. So these are some statistics of the impact of contaminated water on the health of communities and on the economy. So until recently, there weren't fantastic stats about what the impact of contaminated water was on the health of Canadians, Americans, and just the public in general. Probably some of you have heard that fact from the EPA that about 3.5 million people a year get sick. In 2018, in January, the most thorough study came out by the University of Illinois that sort of aggregated existing data and studies and was able to show both the cost on public health as well as the economic cost of recreational water illnesses a year. So you can see here that what they found was that of the 4.04 billion surface water recreation events that occur annually in the US, they resulted in 90 million illnesses nationwide, and they cost the country between $2.2 and $3.7 billion annually. So this study, as I said, was the first to really quantify the number of recreational water illnesses and the economic burden of these illnesses on a national scale in the US. The study also found that about 65% of the annual national cost is attributed to illnesses that resulted in contact with a healthcare practitioner or evaluation in an emergency department. There were between 16 to 67 deaths reported annually a year, and most of those people that were getting sick, the more serious illnesses, were children, followed by elderly, pregnant women, tourists, and people with compromised immune systems, as you could imagine. Canada does not have the same studies that we're able to quantify to this level. We do know that there are approximately 400,000 people a year getting sick from contaminated waters. So Swim Guide's primary goal is to show people where they can swim and let them know when and where the water is clean enough to get into. So how is Swim Guide made? So Swim Guide really is made by 3 groups. It's made by Swimming Fish Canada, our Swim Guide affiliates, and our Swim Guide supporters. Swim Drink Fish essentially builds and manages the platform, and our supporters contribute cash and promotion support to keep Swim Guide going. But really the heart and soul is the Swim Guide affiliates, and that's why they're in the middle of the page. They really are what Swim Guide is all about, what keeps it going. Swim Guide affiliates, they contribute data to the platform. Affiliates are nonprofits, schools, business owners, citizens. We even have government bodies that voluntarily find water quality data and put it into the hands of the public by updating Swim Guide manually with test results from their monitoring programs. So we have about 70 affiliates, and nearly all of those affiliates, they also run recreational water quality monitoring programs, and they use Swim Guide to share their test results. So without our affiliates, there really isn't a Swim Guide. And just to give you a sense of their contribution, there are approximately 3,500 monitored beaches as part of the U.S. EPA Beach Act grant. So there are 30 coastal jurisdictions, 5 U.S. territories, and 3 tribes. Swim Guide has water quality information for over 36 states in 1 territory and for 5,000 beaches in the U.S. So all of this additional information is coming from our Swim Guide affiliates and their citizen science monitoring programs and just to also give you a sense of their contribution, we have 7,000 beaches, as I mentioned, in Swim Guide, and nearly all of the data points are entered manually. So we're looking at, just per beach, we're looking at least 12 test results per season if they're monitored weekly from May to August. But we have in cases where beaches are monitoring daily and some are monitored year round. So each one of these data points that was put into Swim Guide, it required a human being finding that test result, interpreting the test result as either a pass or a fail against the local standard, and they need to log into our beach manager, which is our database, in order to update the beach the latest water quality information. So to date, we've accumulated nearly 3 million data points. And it's a lot of work. It's thousands of hours of data entry a year. And it's worth it because there's 3 million people nearly that have been using Swim Guide to find answers to that question. What are the test results? Should I be getting in the water? So every single test result of those 3 billion data points, that's the process that has to happen each time a test result is shared on Swim Guide, with the exception of 3 places. So the state of Georgia, Wisconsin, and the city of Toronto. So in the last couple of years, we've been seeing more and more open data, and this is fantastic. So the city of Toronto has an open data catalog, which has an XML that we're able to pull. And the state of Georgia also approached us with open data that exists. And we work this summer with Wisconsin, USGS, and the University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh in order to automate all of the beaches in Wisconsin in their beach monitoring program. And this has saved thousands of hours of labor to date. And it's really have an impact. People are looking for this information. And just to give you a sense of how much we've grown, when we first launched in 2011, that whole year we saw about 14,000 users. We have grown substantially, and now we're looking at the height of the summer, about 14,000 users a day, and we're just about to hit 3 million users. So I'm going to jump in now to just give you a little bit more sense of what Swim Guide's all about and some of the features that the public can access. So when we first launched Swim Guide, it was very basic. It was actually just a map with pins on it, and you had to search your beach specifically by name or by the affiliate that did the updates. It was a very, didn't have a lot of content. It just had beach data where people couldn't find, and it was also an app. The public was looking for more than that. So we have updated the design a number of times. We're up to the 3rd version of the app. We've made it multilingual, as I mentioned, English, French, and Spanish. We've also added a significant amount of content. So we have 2 content sections. We have right here. We have beach basics as well as a blog, and this is really answering questions that we've seen people looking for. So for everything from environment, lifestyle, health and safety, as well as just featured articles about what's going on with Swim Guide. So we've added that, and that significantly increased our traffic because people weren't able to find those answers anywhere else. We've been able to take the data that we've accumulated in Swim Guide and publish a number of reports, including the Canada-based report, which we published last year. We've also been working with the Weather Network, so as well as providing information about 7,000 beaches, who's monitoring the beaches, what the latest test results were, what the historical water quality is. People can also access the weather data for their sites. We've also been spending a lot of time working on the automation. So we're really trying to make sure that the service is constantly improving. And one of the ways we can do this is by providing better and faster, more reliable data to our Swim Guide users. So just to give you a little bit of background, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, just to be mindful of time, is that we've been working on ensuring that all this recreational water quality data is moving towards being open. And we launched into a project with CIRA.ca, so the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. They provided us with a grant to help with that process. One of the things that we found with open data is that as it becomes more available, as more monitoring bodies are starting to share their recreational water quality results openly, there wasn't actually a standard for the way so essentially the format in which the data was presented. So with the grant that we received from CIRA and with experts that we worked with, including Adam Griggs from the River Network, we also worked with the EPA, Research and Development, Surfrider Foundation, and Alberta's Health Services. We developed a standard, and it was just recently published in version 1 this year. And essentially, we're looking for better, faster, ways to share recreational water quality data, but that was being impeded by the fact that there wasn't a standard format in which the data was being shared. So this is just a little bit of the background of that project here. We essentially identified the key data requirements in the framework for the first ever open data standard for recreational water quality data. We discussed how the open data standard could be implemented by health units and monitoring bodies, and we're working to address some of the obstacles that both government and nonprofits like ourselves face when they're trying to share their data openly. And we're right now in the stage where the standard is launched. It is actually being used in considered by a number of monitoring bodies, including Safe Swim in New Zealand, as well as the Blue Water Task Force Surfrider, which has about 35 chapters that are monitoring water across the US and Canada. They're looking to adopt our standard in order to automate their test results, and so that they really are meeting sort of what open data is all about. At the end of the presentation, there will be a link to the GitHub where the standard is available, and I would really encourage everyone that's here today to go and visit the standard, the version 1, because we're constantly accepting comments and feedback on the version, just to make sure that it is a sort of future-proofing itself as we move towards the second versions. So just very quickly before I wrap up, I'm just going to show you a few of our background features and new features that we launched this morning, this summer. So first, this is just for anyone that is interested in how the back end of our database. This is Beach Manager, the back end, where affiliates can come and share their data. So as I mentioned, this is also free. Swim Guide is free for anyone that does have recreational water quality data that they would like to share, and with a wide audience. So anyone that's joining, in addition to being able to share their data, they have access to the pollution reporting system. So they would be able to receive and deal with any pollution reports with their beaches. They have support from the Swim Guide staff constantly, as well as platforms such as I mentioned, our Beach Basic content section, and they also have access to analytics, so they can see not only their historical test results, but they can also have access to the number of people that are visiting their beaches, where those people are from, all the things that you can find in Google Analytics, as well as analytics from the beach manager. And finally, these are some of the new features that we launched this summer. So we really wanted to, in addition to just getting people the information that they need about whether or not their beaches met or failed to meet water quality information, we really want to make sure that Swim Guide is meeting that second need about getting people outside and connecting with the water. So we recently launched these new features. So first, we were trying to gather information about, is Swim Guide helping people get outside? So there's a survey that people can fill out that if they're visiting a beach, they're asked essentially, have they been to this beach? Or they consider going to this beach, and whether they've been there before. And we can see that progression if they've answered that they're interested, but they haven't been there. If the next time that they answer, they have now been, we can gather information to see how Swim Guide can help close that intention action gap. We're also seeing that there's a lot of missing information. This was flagged at the beginning of the presentation. There is not enough monitoring data out there for a lot of places. So people can now suggest a beach. If they go to Swim Guide and they see that their beach isn't there, they can suggest a beach. A lot of times, if it's not on Swim Guide, it's, especially in Canada, it's because it isn't monitored. So we're gathering information about a desire for these beaches to be monitored, and we can present that information. If it is monitored, we can also add it to Swim Guide so more people can access that water quality information. The newest feature that we just launched, actually it just came out a few weeks ago, is the photo feature. So essentially this is our photo submission feature, and it's not just selfies at the beach. This is really a beach image database, and it's the first ever international citizen science effort to collect data on beaches around the world with photos. So we're looking for very specific types of photos where someone would go to the beach, open their Swim Guide, and be standing on the shore and take a picture of both the shoreline and the water, and that provides an enormous amount of information, especially if more people do this and it's done over time. And our affiliates can use this to collect information for special reports. Essentially, this database is going to grow, and we'll have this image database for the beaches in Swim Guide. This is different than our pollution reporting system, where it's specifically about pollution. A photo from the beach gathers information from everything to what the water is looking like today, to recreational water use, to water levels. So there's a number of different things that can be done with this citizen science image database for beaches. So I'm going to leave you just with our thought with more information on what Swim Guide is all about. So when I first started at Swim Guide, and I was trained on what Swim Guide, our goals were, I was given this really simple list of what our short, medium, and long-term goals were. So this slide has been around forever, and it's still very much what we're working towards. So in the short term, we want to protect people's health from contaminated water. Secondly, in the medium term, we're trying to get people interested in turning the red beaches into green beaches. But lastly, we really want to strengthen that connection between the public and their shorelines, in order to empower them to protect and restore clean water. So really, our theory of change, it does go back to building momentum, to bringing people together to work for a swimmable, drinkable, fishable future. So As I mentioned, the GitHub link here is here to our open data standard. You can also, if you're not too familiar with open data and you'd like to know a little bit more before you sort of launch into start commenting on the standard, you can visit the website recreationalwater.ca, and you can get more of a background, not just on the standard itself, but on open data in general. The swim guide, you can visit any of the app stores and just look for swim guide, and the website is theswimguide.org. And questions, we're happy to take them now, or you can email me at gabrielle@swimdingfish.ca. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Gabby. So while we switch presenters, I do have a couple of questions from the audience here. The first one from Masi Almeida, who I believe is in the Anacostia. This is a two-part question, and I believe these guys are recent adopters of swim drink fish, so these are good questions here. You mentioned that E. coli data, as collected, it takes 24 hours to get the result. So how do you fill in the gap between that water quality data is available and the current water quality that someone's experiencing at that beach on that day? And his concern is whether or not when they're posting that a beach may be safe, how do they protect themselves from a potential lawsuit if those conditions have changed in the last 24 hours?
That's a really good question, and it's a question that there's a lot of science that's developing. And when I said 24 hours, that's essentially the average time that it takes to get the test results are when people are using persistent rather than the predictive models for recreational water quality. So this is sort of a legacy of recreational water monitoring, is that we're looking for indicator bacteria. So E. coli typically in freshwater and enterococci in marine waters. And in order to know the quantity and whether it's met the standard, it takes about 24 hours to get the test results. However, there's been a number to address that problem. There's been a lot of fantastic science coming out, especially on, in the US on the south side of the Great Lakes, California, different places with rapid test results. So you can get test results in an hour to 4 hours with the PCR, some of the DNA testing. And there is a huge movement towards predictive modeling, which is essentially, not every beach is a candidate for predictive models, but essentially predicting based on historical data, not just the rec water data, but weather, wave, wind movements, how many people are at the beach, that would sort of nowcast what the water quality would be, the same way that you do forecast and nowcast the weather. So we're seeing more and more of that in order to address what the water quality is. So the 24-hour delay, though, we're still seeing the majority of those 7,000 beaches on Swim Guide are still have about a 24-hour delay before we get the test results from the time the sample was taken. And that's not just for a citizen science monitoring. It's actually typically faster when there is a community-based monitoring program sharing the results, especially if they're using something like IDEX. That's just how, unfortunately, recreational water is, and that's why it's really important to sort of look at more, obviously getting better science, but looking at different things like wet weather events. So when there is a citizen science group that is sharing their data, they're not in places like Canada, they actually don't have the authority to issue an advisory. They are more or less sharing the information about whether that water quality passed or failed, whatever the local criteria is. And most of the Beach Act grants states that are monitoring, they are also using that same persistent methods, where that would be 24 hours. So this is sort of baked into the monitoring programs, and there's usually disclaimers such as if the weather changed, the water quality would change. I hope I was able to sort of address that. I can, if there's a follow-up question, I'm happy to continue.
Yeah, there was a kind of a follow-up.
Sure.
Given that, are you able to report model results, some of those forecast or probability of exceedance results to address that 24-hour lag?
Yeah, so we're starting to be, first, we didn't have a lot of predictive modeling results available to share in SwimGuide until the last couple of years. So the best case scenario when there are model results is that it's already available openly. In the case of, say, Safe Swim in Auckland, they refresh their model every 15 minutes. So essentially, there's a new model result every 15 minutes. If somebody had to do manual data entry for the model results, it just wouldn't be possible. So they're looking at our standard and adopting the standard in order to share their predictive model results openly in a portal that we would be able to just automate. So we are right now, what we do have is certain places on the Great Lakes that have model results with a sort of a less frequent update time. So about once a day they update. We are already sharing those model results. It's a fantastic science. We're trying to make sure that it's supported, but it does kind of go with open data. So this is one of the greatest benefits is open data, is that model results can be shared and used and usable, not just in SwimGuide, but anyone that does need to access that information.
So then a question from Dan Shapley. They've been challenged by participating due to the manual upload requirement, given that they have over 400 sampling sites. So this speaks to that open data standard, and they're asking specifically if those Georgia, Minnesota, Toronto resources might be available, or if there are other resources for them to help navigate the batch uploads.
That's a huge amount of data entry, and we have to do that in-house. So I definitely sympathize with Dan. And it would not just be for SwimGuide. I think a lot of people would probably be interested in their test results. So we're seeing it's not just nonprofits; it's actually government bodies that are having trouble moving from like the data collection, sort of the input to the output, and doing it in an open way. So I think that we do need to support groups, government bodies that are looking to share their data openly and maybe don't have the capacity to do so. So we are hoping to develop some sort of a toolkit that would be able to help with that process. But I would definitely suggest that you don't want to do multiple data entries in different places. If there's a way to do it in one spot where people can then pull your test results, that especially with this much data that's going out, that's going to be the best case scenario for everyone. It's just going to be faster, more consistent, more reliable. So we are seeing we do have, as I mentioned, it's mostly government bodies right now that have been automated, but the Surfrider Foundation is a really, really good example. They've had open data for all of their Blue Water Task Force, the chapters. There's about 35 of them for a really, really long time. So I am happy to make some connections with some existing nonprofits that are already sharing their test results openly.
Okay, and we want to make sure we have enough time for our next presentation. We do have a couple more questions, so if there's time at the end, we can circle back to those, or just give some written answers directly to those question askers. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Heath Kelsey and Emily from, again, the Integration Application Network, which is a program of the University of Maryland. So Heath, take it away.
Great, thanks. Can you guys see the presentation okay? I'll make sure I'm sharing it okay. I'm going to take that as an okay. But first, let me say thanks for having us here. It's really fun to talk about this stuff. And I also really enjoyed the presentation from Gabrielle. I think there's a whole lot of really fascinating stuff happening, in particular in that area of forecasting and presenting forecast results. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some expanded results from that. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about ecosystem health report cards. And what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the report card basics and the process of developing one. And then Emily will talk a little bit about some of the communication components of a report card, kind of how to and things to do and not to do. So, first question people ask is, what do you mean by a report card? What's involved? And we've done quite a few report cards around the world. The first one we did was, in the U.S. at least, was the Chesapeake Bay report card. So the Chesapeake Bay Foundation presents a report card of sorts, and ours is a little bit more, I don't know, transparent or data-driven, and we present results from 15 different reporting regions around the Bay, and we've been doing this report card since 2007. First report card reported on 2006. So, we present the results of the reporting regions around the Bay and an overall score for the Chesapeake Bay. It's really based in ecological health. So these are, they started out as very much ecosystem-based report cards, things like water quality and seagrass and water clarity and things. So we present the results for each one of these reporting regions and then a trend for different, how things are doing in each one of those regions over time. And this generated a lot of interest, and a lot of people wanted to kind of emulate this report card process in other places, which we did. This is a sampling of some of the report cards that we've worked on in different places around the world, and this is actually a little bit outdated. We need to update this image, but suffice it to say that it's been a process that we've been really excited about implementing in other areas. And as we've been doing it, we've realized that the process that we go through to develop a report card is pretty much the same wherever we go. And we've kind of evolved the report card to be something a bit more holistic than just looking at ecosystem health. And also, as part of a larger kind of information distribution or information pyramid is what we call this. And the idea is that the report card is just the most synthetic component of this information pyramid. It presents the distilled results from a lot of other data and information, and by displaying it this way and linking it to these other things, people can get to the information that's right for them. So, policymakers and the general public might be most interested in the main messages that are coming out of the report card itself. But then other groups that are tasked with, management or research might want to dig down a little bit deeper. And so we want to make sure that it's a transparent process. So if you start at the report card, you can get to the information that is supporting it. And it also provides the basis for the report card. So you can pick up the report card and look at it and know that there's a lot of data and analysis that go into the results that you're seeing. As I mentioned, it's much more holistic than it used to be. We're incorporating much more, many more things than pure ecosystem health. There are social, governance, cultural factors that are now incorporated into the report card. It's very much a stakeholder-driven process now. We started out, with a bunch of scientists sitting around and saying, okay, how should we talk about ecosystem health in the Chesapeake Bay? But the more recent report cards that we do are really driven by stakeholders. And so there's lots of different perspectives. And this has forced us into kind of a transdisciplinary approach, which is basically multidisciplinary science, but also involving and including non-scientists and stakeholders in the process from the very beginning, so that everybody owns it equally. And that creates a lot of benefits in that it creates a platform for engagement of lots of different stakeholders working on something together, which is really important. So to create an ecosystem health report card, it's really 3 distinct phases. The first one is really about planning. We have to do a lot of work up front before we can engage in the process. The meat of it is the second phase. It's the report card process itself, There's 5 steps. And then the last part is that, kind of a recent addition to our process. It's like, okay, well, we've communicated the results of this analysis, but how can we use this information or leverage this information to make improvements in the condition of the region? And so I'll talk a little bit about the 5 steps here in a moment. But the first place is really about stakeholder engagement and planning. So who is it, given the scope of issues that you're tackling in the report card, the people that are represented in the region, the interests that are represented, who do we have to have in the room when we're designing this report card? And we like to err on the side of inclusion. We don't want to make it an exclusive process at all. And the first thing we do is to do a little stakeholder mapping. Who are the players in this region? Who do they represent? And what kind of interest do they have in the quality of this ecosystem? And then what kind of influence do they have as well? And this is very helpful in the beginning in figuring out who needs to be represented in the workshops and meetings that design the report card. But as you'll see, it's also really important at the end. How can we leverage this information to create some change? The 5 steps of the report card are really, as I said, the kind of meat of it. How do you get from this idea of creating a report card to a report card product? I mentioned earlier that the process is really important. The process is enabled by the idea that you're going to come up with a product. So all these people are working together on a product, this report card thing that comes out of this process. But it's the process of going through it with all the different stakeholders working on something together that's really the most powerful, I think. So we start with a conceptualization. We get as many stakeholders and as broad a perspective as we can in a room and say, okay, what do you care about in this system? What are the things that are happening here? And we come to some kind of common understanding about what's important in this system and how it works. And then from there, we can begin to choose appropriate indicators. So we've identified the things that we care about and what's happening here. That can lead us to choosing indicators that are relevant to those things that we care about. And that's often a difficult process and a lot of back and forth about what are the best indicators to use, but we come out with a group consensus on what to choose as the best indicators. There's a lot of different thoughts about choosing good indicators. I won't get into that, but there's a lot of the literature and scientific literature that goes into what makes a good indicator. Once we choose those indicators, we can determine what the desired condition is. So what's our threshold? What does a good condition look like? Because the way the report card works is, excuse me, is that we, for each one of these things that we measure, we want to have an idea of what the desired condition is for that thing. So what should dissolved oxygen in this estuary be? Or what should an appropriate chlorophyll concentration be for this time of the year in this part of the ecosystem? And then we can say, okay, well, this is what we want it to be. How close are we to achieving that? And that's where we can calculate grades. So if we have an objective or a threshold to work to, how close are we to getting there? That can lead us to calculating a grade. And then the fun part is, okay, this is great. We've got these results. What is this telling us about our system? What are the stories that are coming out of the analyses and the things we're seeing? And how do we communicate those results? So those are the basic 5 steps. This is obviously the Cliff Notes version. We taught a whole course last spring, or last fall and spring, on how to do this. And we've created a book or 2 about this process. So I'll present a link to some of that stuff at the end. And then, once we get the report card, what do we do with that information? And there's a couple of examples. We're still kind of struggling with this, to be honest with you. It's not an easy question to answer. The first example was the Mississippi River report card that came out in October of 2015, and this led directly to the change in the theme, or setting the theme for the 2016 Upper Mississippi River Conference, because they weren't happy with the grade that the Upper Mississippi River received in that report card, and so they convened this whole conference to decide how to leverage that result and make changes that would improve conditions and then therefore the score. And we presented a white paper of action items that was delivered to Congress in January of 2017. The other kind of avenue, one of the other avenues that we've gone down, and we're still not sure about the results of this, is to link the report card with system dynamics modeling. And there's some work that's been recently completed in the Orinoco River Basin in South America, in Colombia, where a system dynamics modeling, which you can see is very complex, we're attempting to link that to the report card results. So what if we changed one thing? How would that change the results for the other components of the system? This is still, it's recently completed, but we still consider it kind of ongoing. We're not sure of if this is going to be a valuable avenue or not at this point, but it's something we're trying. And then I mentioned that the stakeholder analysis can also be really helpful in this part of the process too. So we've got these stakeholders that we've identified, and we've thought about how much influence they have and how, what interest they have. We can also look at the network of relationships between these organizations as a stakeholder network analysis, and leverage that to say, okay, well, these people are really the people that see about this component of the system, and those are the people that are going to have the most influence over that. So that's something we're also pursuing as part of the report card process. I mentioned that we've had a bit of an evolution in the report card process, and from ecology and really natural resource based to looking at a much more holistic, looking at multiple sectors and perspectives. We've looked at, like, okay, this is a snapshot of the current conditions, and we're moving to including things like, okay, how do we use that to improve future conditions? In the past has been, these things have been products that we have generated. We've been, given some grant money to create a report card in a certain region. We go there, we fly in, and we create the report card, and then we fly out again. Our emphasis now is on helping our partners do this themselves. So how do we train folks to go through this process and lead the effort themselves? And I don't want to say that we don't focus on data and information accuracy. Certainly that's a big component of what we want to keep doing, but we've recently recognized that the process of creating this report card with all these people is really, really important, and so we want to include more focus on that and highlight the value in that. Just to kind of wrap up my component, we have a few projects that are either recently finished or are ongoing. The Tennessee River report card, we just finished with the Tennessee River Basin Network, and we're still working with them on the next phase of that. Coral reef report cards with NOAA. So everywhere that NOAA has responsibility for coral reef management, we're working on report cards for them. That's obviously a pretty big lift. Florida Everglades restoration with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, also a pretty big lift. But we also go to some crazy places to do report cards. So we're working with WWF in Mongolia, in Zambia, and with the India Ministry of Environment and Forest on the coast of India and a couple of places. But then more close to home, we've got a report card ongoing for the Texas coast, working with the Heart Research Institute. with Texas A&M. And we're also just starting a project for the Western Lake Erie report card with the Lake Erie Foundation and the Verity River with Nature Conservancy and Friends of the Verity River. So we're quite busy. Some of these are report cards that we are doing, but most of them are report cards that we are helping others do. And so that's a really important distinction. A couple of examples of previous projects that we've worked on. This is an example. This is the Mississippi River report card that we finished in 2015. We did that in partnership with the Nature Conservancy and America's Watershed Initiative. That got a lot of press and a lot of attention when that came out in 2015. The Orinoco River report card was the first one that we did in partnership with WWF in Colombia, South America. That one was also really well received. And you'll notice that these are, ecology and things of biodiversity and ecosystems are only one part of the report card. We want to report on things in a much more holistic way than when we started. This is a draft of one of the report cards that's going to be released soon for the NOAA's Coral Reef report card project, and this is for American Samoa. Pay no attention to the grade there. It's I think that's changed, and I'm not supposed to show you that anyway. I also mentioned that we have some resources available for creating report cards, information about our courses and our report cards, as well as PDFs of the report cards that we've produced or been involved in are all available for free download on our website. And so with that, I will turn it over to Emily, who will talk about the communication component of the report cards.
Thanks, Heath. Yeah, that was really great, setting up the overall structure of a report card. And I'm going to talk to us about what I consider the fun step, which is, step 5 of the process, communicating the results that we've worked to create. And I want to start off by saying that no two report cards are identical. And they can't be, because every region of the world is completely different. So each report card is going to reflect that. But despite having different nuances, different results, different details, these report cards do have the same basic skeletal structure, if you will. So the basic components of a report card are pretty simple. So the first thing that we do want to start out with is just a brief introduction, and this is, why are we doing this? So what's important about your river basin? Why is it unique? Why is it special? Why do you want to protect it? Why are we grading it? And then paired with that, you will also want to introduce what report cards are, because generally speaking, if someone were to pick up this 6-page or 8-page document, even if it's clear and pretty and interesting, they may not understand the point of the report card unless you tell them what the process was, why we're doing this, and how you did it. So you'll do your brief introduction, and then of course you want the grade, because ultimately someone's going to be looking at this report card because they want to know what the status is of a certain river basin or watershed. Arguably the most important part of the report card is the grade, although along with that you also want to present what was graded. So for example, in your report card, if you've broken down your watershed into subregions, you want to explain that. You want to say why you chose these subregions, what's important about them, why were they graded differently, and what indicators go into these grades, and how what the condition is of each of these indicators. And along that same vein, you want to give a little bit of an explanation onto how you ended up grading these indicators, because as Heath mentioned, with the thresholds and choosing indicators, each one is going to be evaluated differently. People aren't going to intuitively understand how you graded what you chose. And I say this with a little bit of a caveat, because report cards are designed to be very short, concise documents. You want to be as transparent as possible, but you also don't want to overload your audience with information. So if you think back to the information pyramid that we presented at the beginning, and how report cards are just the tip of the pyramid and they sit on top of every other level of information, this report card is going to draw upon all those other levels of information and synthesize just the key points. So at this point, when you want to explain how certain indicators or regions were graded, you're going to end up referring back to a methods document, which comes with each report card, or a website with more information. So this is just, the report card is designed to capture people's attention, bring them in, and then they can dive further into the details in other places. And along with all the grades and the basic information about report cards, this is your chance to really show other stories in the river basin. So what else is happening here? What's important? Are there projects that are ongoing that are worth talking about? You know, or how do we raise the grade? What's a snapshot on what can the general public do to help improve the grade in your river basin? So this is a really good opportunity to highlight any other stories that you want to show. And the purpose of the report card really focuses on the design of it, because you want to be able to communicate as effectively as possible, but with as little real estate as possible. So we always design our report cards to be as short as possible. They're generally 6 pages or at most 8 pages. So this is an example of the Maryland Coastal Bays report card from this year. It was just released last week, and they have it down to a science at this point. I mean, they produce these report cards. This is their 10th year, I believe, that they've been doing this. And they've got 6 pages, and they've really ironed out exactly what they want to say. They're very clear. They have great photos, great graphics. But yeah, in general, you want your report cards to be short and with as little amount of text as possible, but still getting as much information as possible on there. Of course, they need to be visually rich, because we really want to grab our audience's attention. You can do this in a lot of different ways. There are so many different visuals that are worth including in a report card, and this can range anywhere from infographics to photographs to maps, and then even conceptual diagrams. So this is an example that we like to show. It's not strictly from a report card, it's actually from a different document, but it's what we call a conceptual diagram. So it's a visual depiction of an ecosystem and the pressures and drivers and features of that ecosystem, how they interact with each other, what's being threatened, what's actually happening right now. Of course, this one's a little busy, but it does have a lot of information, and it's really interesting, and it really draws you into the report card. So this is what I do at Ian. I make all the report card documents, so design is kind of the world that I live in, and every day I have to make these decisions, but I like to share it, just the basics, because it's so important when how you communicate, how you're going to catch someone's attention. And they're so basic decisions, but they're worth considering. So the first thing that I like to consider is color. Sounds silly, but it's true. Colors inherently have a meaning. So blue is a very natural color. It's very soothing. It's a great color scheme, especially for ecosystem health report cards. We often use what we call stoplight colors for our grade scale, and I'll show that on the next slide too. But really, you just want to take a step back and ask, what are these colors doing for me, or why did I choose these colors? This is also a really good opportunity to bring in like a cultural component from your ecosystem. So maybe you've got an indigenous culture living on the watershed that you're assessing. You could bring in aspects of their culture into this report card to make it a little more location specific and more meaningful. And when I mention stoplight colors, this is what I mean. It's our grading scale where, generally speaking, in the Western world, we associate green to be good and red to be bad. So on the sliding scale of green to red, that's how we grade our indicators. So it's just a really quick snapshot into the status of the ecosystem. And this is the color convention that we've been using for years. That's not to say it's right or wrong. It has worked everywhere we've been so far. Other things worth considering, and I'm just going to fly through some of these. Font, for sure. Fonts say a lot about what you're trying to communicate. There's 2 different major styles of font. There's serif versus sans serif. I heavily recommend the sans serif font. I think it's just cleaner. It provides more white space in your documents. In my personal opinion, serif fonts look a little dated, but to each their own. And there is a time and a place for each font, but it's just something that don't just default to whatever your computer says. You should give it 2 minutes of your time and make it much better than what it could be. Contrast. There's a lot of different ways that you can make contrast in your science communication, whether it be color or typography or size of your images. The point here is that you want your main information or your main photo or your main graphic to be the focus of your document. And so you do that by creating this visual hierarchy by changing different elements on the page. So if we want to highlight something, we probably want it to be the biggest, brightest, standalone piece on the report card. And along the same vein, you need to consider the white space and balance and visual hierarchy on the page. You don't want to scare people away from looking at your document by overloading them with too much text or not enough images or images that they can't see because they're all overlapping each other and they're all over the page. It's just, these are really simple decisions that should only take a few minutes to organize and make it look good, but it's really worth the investment of time. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, it's really important that you bring in the unique flair from your river basin into each report card, because no two places are the same. And these report cards, not only are they to show a status of the ecosystem at a certain snapshot in time, but they're supposed to celebrate how beautiful and unique these different places are, and to share that with a bunch of different audiences. And yeah, that's what I have for us today on the communication side.
Great.
So thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Emily and Heath. We have just a couple of questions, and folks, do please put in some more if you have some questions for Heath and Emily. The first one was just a quick, they missed the URL to download the guide from University of Maryland. So if one of you guys could type that URL into the answer box, and then we could send that out to everyone on the webinar. And the second question we have is, how often do you need to complete water quality monitoring to be able to create a report card? And second, larger question, how is that monitoring going to be funded?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part?
The question about how can you fund your monitoring if it needs to be such a high level?
Oh, how do you fund the monitoring efforts? That's usually a decision or something that's happened before we get to this this process or this product. Sometimes we've been able to use the existing data, and through the process of developing a report card, we can demonstrate that we really don't have enough information, or we don't have the information that we would like to have in order to make an assessment. And so the report card can kind of start out as not quite as an incomplete, but it can have some information there that says, hey, we base this on the best information we have, but we recognize it's not quite as adequate as it should be. And here's what we need to do. So it can actually be helpful in developing funding opportunities and demonstrating that funding for monitoring is necessary. This happened to some extent at Chilika Lake in India. We prepared the report card based on the existing data that we had, and there were some components that we recognized weren't quite right, or we didn't have the data that we really needed to assess a certain component. And so they changed their monitoring schedule and process to collect those data. So, generally speaking, when someone is ready to do a report card, there's something there that says, okay, we have enough information to start one. And that's usually, the funding for those things is usually something that's happened well before we get there. Now, funding the report card development can come from a number of different sources. We've got foundations that have helped fund the report cards. We've gotten money from local governments. We've gotten money from state governments, and even things like the World Bank and UN funding to do some in some places. Generally speaking, the smaller report cards will be done with private funding, foundations, et cetera. But some of the larger ones may be done with additional government or non-government funding as well.
Okay, great. A couple more questions have come in. How do you choose the basins where you work if the stakeholders haven't reached out to you themselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've tried to actually move in a bit more of a strategic way to select and go after funding where we think report cards would be beneficial. One, we're really trying to advance, well, there's two that come to mind. One is the Great Lakes, because we think that that region, it's a transboundary system. Western Lake Erie is a bit of a mess, and we think that a report card could really do wonders, both in the process of getting all the stakeholders together, as I said, and also highlighting to the public what some of the issues are, and then expanding that to the rest of the Great Lakes. We think that's a region that could really benefit from it. And the other one is the Gulf of Mexico. We think that the Gulf is another place that has multiple jurisdictions, both U.S. states, Mexico, Cuba, that could really benefit from a report card process if it was done right and was seen as kind of a unifying, a project that could bring people together. But to be honest, that's been a tough hill to climb. We recognize these things that we want to do, but the bulk of our report card work is from folks that say, hey, I saw the Chesapeake Bay report card, or I saw the Long Island Sound report card or something. I think we would really benefit from that here, and so can you help us? And so we're a bit reactive in that. I think that's great, and we want to help as many people as we can in developing those things. And there's lots of ways for us to partner with organizations in creating the report card. From very simple training, we've had people from watershed organizations take our report card course, and all the way up through us being the University of Maryland being the people that go out and convene the meetings and create the report card. So anything in that spectrum is the way that we can work with partners to create the report card.
Okay, now we have a question from Frank in Alabama, similar to one we had for Gabby. Question about liability and the defensibility of the grading systems. For example, if a beach does not meet bacteria standards, and you've given it a grade of a B, but if someone gets sick from swimming in that area, what are your concerns about liability, and what experiences have you had in this area?
Yeah, that's funny. It's a question that comes up as we're contemplating a report card or going through the beginning process of the report card, but it has never happened. And the key to it is transparency. We recognize that the information is, or the results of the report card are as good as the information that goes into it. And here's how we did it. There are obviously different ways to do it, but this is the information that we had to go on, and this is how we analyzed it. So that information pyramid is really important in providing that transparency. And honestly, although it's caused a lot of angst for some people in the beginning, by the time we get to the end, people are over it. They're not worried about it because they see how the process goes. It's not a couple of people making these decisions. It's a large group of people making very informed and deliberate decisions about this in a very transparent way, and that seems to alleviate the fears. And then the fact that it just hasn't happened. Nobody has come back to us with any you know, oh, this is really terrible, you know, you didn't get this right, and so we're going to hold you liable. That's, you know, that has not come up at all.
Okay, and the last question looks like someone's having a little trouble finding that download you mentioned. So if you guys are able to find the URL for where that's located and paste that into the answer box under the questions, we should be able to send that direct URL out to the group.
Yep. It's actually on our website. In our home page, you should be able to go to it. Emily's trying to pull up the direct link to that guide right now. And then we will we'll put that in there. But if you go to our website, which is www. I am going to type that in here, and go to resources. You will be able to find that information. Oops, and then I went out to the organizers. Let me type that for everyone. I don't think I can. I can't send it out to everyone, so I will the organizers to share that with the rest of the group.
I think I pasted it in the answers section there, so they should be able to see that now.
Okay.
So I think that's it. So I just want to thank Gabby and Heath and Emily for the presentations today. Before everyone goes, remember there are additional resources you can find on the Urban Waters Learning Network website. I will also stop to make a pitch for our Science and Technical Resources portal, where you can actually find links to both swim guide programs and the EN programs, amongst other science resources for completing watershed science activities. And a couple of brief announcements. Remember that this will be recorded if you'd like to look for this later. You will also be receiving a brief evaluation survey, so please do fill that out for us. And finally, maybe most importantly, River Rally workshop proposals are due October 1st. So if you would like to submit a workshop for next year's 2019 River Rally in Cleveland, Ohio, we've got about a week left on that. So at that, I'd like to thank everyone for participating today and attending the webinar. We really hope it was informative, and please do look for more of these in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you all.
Thank you.